Do you ever find yourself being drawn to a character whilst being unable to really explain why? For me, that character was Toji. There's just something about him that goes far beyond just his physique, and that's definitely part of his appeal, but there are countless characters in anime with just as much muscle that simply don't hit the same as Toji. Because what Toji represents is a side of us that we don't really like to admit to. The side that wants to prove the world that they're wrong about us, that we will or have already turned ourselves into something that has exceeded their expectations of us. And obviously for some people, that can be quite a dark thing. Toji obviously endured a lot of abuse from his family. For some people, it's simply others who have tried to bring them down or look down on them, and I've had phases like that, right? And in the short term, it's kind of natural and fine, even beneficial to an extent, provided you heed the warning that Toji's conclusion gives, that it will likely never be enough. Our first introduction to him comes at the end of Season 2's first episode, where he immediately catches our interest due to denouncing the name Zenin and claiming he goes by Fushiguro now. Obviously, two surnames we're very familiar with through Maki and Megumi, but I think the fact that he's gambling in his next appearance is actually quite significant, as after all you'd probably agree that for some people, gambling is kind of this desperate man's attempt to change his fate, quickly and effortlessly, as opposed to finding a more productive, sustainable way to do so. But you'd also probably agree that on the surface, Toji does not seem to fit this description at all. He clearly trained exceptionally hard to be as skilled as he is, capable of taking on the job of an assassin and breaking away from the Zenin Clan, except he hasn't. Despite that iconic line of the one who left it all behind, certainly at this point in time, I don't think Toji has escaped the Zenin Clan's curse. He's still very much bound by his fate of being born into it, and much of how he acts is because of his hatred towards them. He's still fighting that fate, hence he's still gambling, still looking for a quick way to break free, and I'll come back to why in his fight against Gojo. Speaking of which, after being given the mission, we see that he understands Gojo's strength and recognizes that he needs to wear him down first, displaying a level of rationality that the others who challenged Gojo in this arc lacked. And I think this is another of the more simple reasons why we like Toji. You know, he's smart, right? There's far more to it than that, as we'll come to, but I think part of it is honestly just he's smart, strong, disciplined. He just has these very admirable traits. And with a name like Sorcerer Killer, the suspense only builds over who the hell is this guy? How does he know Megumi? How does he know exactly what Gojo's abilities are? And what are his abilities? He doesn't show up for a while after this, but we know that whilst the gang are enjoying their happy beach day, there's this threat looming in the background. But we still fall for Toji's trap in the same way as Gojo. We kind of forget about him, and so our guard is down as they re-enter Jujutsu High. And obviously, you remember what happens next. To the Zenin family, him having no cursed energy was a failure. To Gojo, it's his scariest, most frustrating strength, as he can't track his movements. And again, I'm sure no one's forgotten the state Gojo ends up in at the end of this fight. And of course, he doesn't stop there, as he then proceeds to end Amani's life, who, ironically, was someone in a similar situation to him, forced into tragic circumstances for being born a certain way. You could see it as Toji perpetuating this cycle of hatred, now dishing out onto others what was done to him. And after defeating Geto, we get the line, "But you guys, with all your blessings, lost to a monkey like me who can't even use Jujutsu." And I agree in part with what most people say about this, in that that's how he sees himself, and shows some jealousy towards those with blessings as he sees them in their powerful curse techniques. But I think it's more him taunting them, saying, "Shouldn't you have won, given that I'm just a monkey?" He assumes everyone sees him the same way the Zenin Clan does, as a failure with no cursed energy, which isn't true, by the way. Even when he reappears later on, everyone is just terrified of him. No one is looking down on this guy, but this also comes back to his bottomless need for validation. As though he's pointing out to Geto, the Zenin Clan, and himself that I won again despite no cursed energy, even against these two. You were wrong about me. And this should have been enough. He's just taken down 2 special grade sorcerers stronger than any member of the Zenin Clan, one of which is of course the strongest. He'd already proven them utterly and completely wrong about him. But it was never enough. He needed more and more to continually self-affirm that they were wrong about him. He'd already proved it to himself. He'd mortally wounded Gojo, proved that even the strongest wasn't out of his reach, but it still wasn't enough. And why do you think that was? It even looks like he's seeking a bit of validation or comfort from this agent guy. As the two laugh and joke about the events of the previous days, Toji then asks him if he wants to go to a fancy restaurant together, and is met with rejection. And given the thought process we've seen from him, I've no doubt that, again, he assumed it was personal. That is because he's a no curse energy monkey. And the agent's line about, "I know how you don't pay the bills for men," presumably refers to dates with women that Toji's been on, where he pays the bill for them. Given this guy knows about that, the pair are clearly pretty close, right? And yet even he doesn't see Toji as a friend. He doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. And I think that really stung him. But do you not think he's looking for validation in the complete wrong place? Maybe this shady agent and his brutal clan's opinions shouldn't be what dictates his life. As after all, why is he even here in the first place? Why do you think he suddenly came out of retirement to take on a mission like this? We'll come back to that in a moment, because as he walks along, he encounters the strongest, once again, risen from the dead. But even though Gojo lived, he'd already failed his mission. He'd essentially lost and even acknowledged that he's only really alive due to a slight bit of carelessness on Toji's part. The strongest sorcerer in the world, one above even the Zenin Clan, one whose birth changed the very balance of the world, showed in his own way respect to Toji and his abilities. But that still wasn't enough for Toji. He had no logical reason to stay, but he wanted the undeniable, concrete proof, the ultimate FU to the Zenin Clan and everyone who'd ever looked down on him, that they were wrong. He wanted to defeat the man who had everything he didn't, who was blessed with a technique that made everyone look up to him. And it's honestly completely understandable. Is it the right thing to do? No. Does it make sense for him to stay and risk his life for that pride? Not at all, but I get it. If you'd spend your whole life from such a young age, as Toji has, being called a failure, belittled, treated like trash, given that chance to show those same people that you're this much better than them, I think, truthfully, we'd all want to, logical or otherwise. And it's the essence of that feeling that I think so many of us relate to in Toji, a man with this kind of vengeance against the world, eager to prove it wrong. It's incredibly hard to fight that feeling, but whilst not doing so might not cause you to lose your life like it did for Toji, it can certainly cause you to waste yours. He wouldn't be doing all of this if he wasn't trying to prove that point, if he wasn't trying to self-affirm that he's doing well. And I think so many people do this. And it's one thing if it's something you're going to do regardless and you're just using it as a bit of motivation. I think that's the case with a lot of people going to the gym or whatever, but to warp your whole life around just proving a point to someone, you know, for example, chasing a career you hate, but it pays well so you get to show off to people, it may never be enough. You might be looking for validation in the complete wrong place. And so as he weighs up Gojo's moveset, Toji is convinced he can actually do this. He can handle red, he can handle blue, but something is off. Something isn't right. And I don't think this is some sort of instinctual warning that Gojo had something else up his sleeve. It's more of a, I shouldn't be doing this. And that to fight someone like Gojo of all people, purely to prove a point, is crazy. And he already knew that he couldn't beat Gojo in a fair fight. That's why he wore him down first. So it's not as though running would be a hit to his pride, but he just couldn't let go of his anger towards the Zenin Clan and his desire to prove them wrong. And this to me just shows that it's never gonna end. As I said, him taking down Gojo and Geto the way he did already put him above the Zenin Clan, who have no special grade sorcerers, but he had to go further than that, and even if you beat Gojo here, then you'd have to find something else. It would have just never ended. And so Gojo's hollow purple blasts through him, and as he stands there, half his torso missing, he just looks so sad. Not at his defeat, but at himself for not having moved past something he thought he'd left behind. When we look at this panel here of him holding Megumi, I wasn't even sure if it was him at first glance. He just looks so different, so happy. And so again I ask, why do you think he came back to this life? We know his wife died, and obviously that's a awful, tragic thing to happen to someone, but to abandon his son because of her? To go back to the life of a killer when he was so happy before? I think the line, "I had decided not to respect myself or anyone else," is very telling, because in what world is being a father and bringing up his son in a good house not respecting himself? Well, maybe in the brutal world of the Zenin Clan, where instead he should be training himself and his son to be a soldier. They likely wouldn't have agreed with the way he'd chosen to live before his wife died, and no doubt he found himself internally fighting that at times. He thought he'd chosen to live that way regardless, and yet once again he found himself going back to the curse of Zenin. According to his profile in volume 9, he'd escaped and calmed down whilst his wife was alive, but as soon as she died, that was it. And you can see how in the aftermath of something like that, all his negative thought patterns drilled into him by the Zenin Clan's treatment towards him would have all come rushing back. So much so that we later find out he went to sell Megumi to the Zenin Clan, claiming that they treat Megumi better than they treated him. And it's such a sudden change from the panel before, where he was holding him as though it was the best thing to ever happen to him. He even chose his name because it means blessings. The only explanation I really have is that he saw himself as so lowly, so unworthy, that he thought even the Zenin Clan would be a better place for him, as after all, Megumi had a technique. As such, he would be able to get by because he wasn't a monkey like he was. We don't know exactly how long it was after his wife's death that he made this decision. Evidently, it wasn't very long, given that he mentions waiting until he's about 5 or 6 to verify his technique, but also that he has talent, so presumably can't have been too far off that age. I mean, how do you verify the fighting talent of a 2-year-old? But the point being, Toji kind of threw everything away after his wife died. He went back to being as cold and heartless as he was growing up, and the saddest part is, on death's door, he completely regrets it. He does care about his son. He doesn't want him to grow up in the Zenin Clan, but it's far too late. All he can do at this point is hope Gojo will interfere with the sale due to the rivalry between the clans. This guess turns out to be correct, although for different reasons. Gojo interfered to prevent the youth being taken away from young people, as he believes in that quite strongly. But at the time, Toji had no guarantee this was going to work. I mentioned this in my Gojo video, but he doesn't really know Gojo. I'm sure he thought that there was a chance that Gojo would just kill his son to stop someone who could threaten him as much as Toji did from growing up. And so Toji dies full of regrets, wishing he'd stayed with his son, wishing he hadn't given in to that urge to fight for pride, and that if he got another chance, he'd do it all differently. In a very different way to Gojo, Toji Zenin returns to life, fighting solely on instinct as a puppet of carnage that bears his fangs at the strongest. An interesting note here is that the name she says is specifically Toji Zenin and not Fushiguro. And I know that's just because that's his name from birth, but I do also think we get the Zenin side of him, the ruthless killer endlessly fighting everything around him. And this fight, if you can even call it that, against Dagon really puts into perspective just how strong he really is. We already knew he was a monster from his fight against Gojo, but during that fight, it was kind of hard to gauge how much Gojo's exhaustion affected him and how much weaker he was when he was a teenager. But here, we see him just crushing the special grade that the 4 others previously fighting him seriously struggled with. In fact, they were all trying to escape him the moment Toji enters, and it's not as though any of these guys are weak. After doing so, he takes a moment to decide his next target before lunging at Megumi with such speed that it feels like he's been teleported. Speed that, according to Megumi, rivals and potentially even exceeds Sukuna's, or at least Sukuna in the state he was in when Megumi fought him. And we don't need to go through the whole fight, but Megumi can't really do anything but run. His only plan being to try and land a blow was to allow Toji to skewer him first. And seeing Megumi up close was enough of a shock for him to regain control for a moment. And the only thing he wants to know is what his surname is. That was his first thought, and after finding out Gojo stopped him from being sold to the Zenin Clan, that his last gamble paid off, it's enough for him. He takes his own life before there's any chance of losing control and killing Megumi. He doesn't tell Megumi who he is, which I imagine meant that he didn't think Megumi would want to know. Evidently he still sees himself very lowly, but he knows his son is doing well, and that's what really mattered to him. Not his vengeance against the Zenin Clan. What difference does that make to him now? And you know, it's been a long time since I felt like I could relate to his vengeance against the Zenin Clan. You know, whilst that kind of mindset, like, it happens, you know, and if it pushes you to go harder in whatever it is you're pursuing, I don't think there's too much issue there, as you'll probably naturally move past it with time, provided you're not in some sort of extreme circumstances like Toji was growing up. But whilst I understand and share the desire to look the way he does, I think to live your whole life as this vengeful spectre, to twist and distort your whole route to prove someone wrong about you, is something you'll regret the same way Toji did.